Hi, Jackie here for Eclectic Images again. Today I'm working with the Eclectic Images So Special kit. In front of me here I've got all the products that come in the kit. The kit is called So Special, but you'll get in the kit one Quilt Element stand, one sewing machine stand, one You Are So Special stand, a Damask stencil, a Japanese lacquer embossing powder, gorgeous colour that one. You also get 4 sheets of Eclectic Images 12x12 paper called Dance. You'll also get 6 12x12 sheets of cardstock, 2 of each colour. Okay, so what are we going to need for today's project? So out of the kit we're using a piece of the Dance 12x12 paper, some of the brown cardstock and some of the apricot. We're also using each of the stamps that are in the set. We're going to use Catherine Pooler Coral Cabana from the Party Collection, and that comes in the Carnival set. We're also going to be using Versamagic Sahara Sand ink, Versamark ink, the Japanese lacquer embossing powder, and what we'll create is this card. There we go. I've also made this card. We won't be making this one today, but it uses the stencil from the design, from the set, and Catherine Pooler Peppermint Scrub ink, the Sahara Sand ink, and I also used a black marker to add in a few extra details for that one. Okay, and there's one other card I've made, which is this one, and this one uses the Quilt Element Set and some liquid pearls in chestnut, embossing powder in bronze rose, some Catherine Pooler ink in polished, and also I've used for this one of Eclectic Images quilt quote stamps. This one is called Quilt Will Warm. So there's a range of those quilt quotes in the Eclectic range. This one doesn't come in the set, but it's just something else you could use with the stamps that are in the set. Okay, let's get into making today's make. What I've done is I've already cut up my pieces for you. So this one here is a piece of the Dance paper, which I have cut to 13 by 13 centimeters. I've cut a piece of the brown cardstock to 15 by 15, and then a piece of the apricot cardstock to 15.6 by 15.6. So once this is all put together, this will fit into a 16 centimeter square envelope. Okay, so let me pop the cardstock aside for now. We don't need that at the moment. And we'll start with our Dance paper, which we're going to stamp onto. So I'm going to use the Quilt Element Set, and the first stamp we're going to use is this square outline. So I've already popped that stamp onto my acrylic block. Let's move that out of the way. Okay, so with this outline we're using the Catherine Pooler Coral Cabana. Now the Catherine Pooler inks are quite juicy, and this outline has a background area we don't want to stamp onto because that will show up on our image. So we just want to get that very edge, the border. So be very careful and gentle and just tap the ink pad just onto that edge. If you do happen to get any ink on that inside bit, you can use the corner of a sponge. Just go in and take the excess ink off. Alright, I'm going to stamp this as a diamond. Now what I want is I want each corner of the diamond to be vertical, and I want that top and that left-hand side to meet the edge of the paper. So I'm just going to line it up, make sure it's vertical, and stamp it in that corner. Okay. Then we're going to repeat this until we have our pattern organised. So again, just inking up gently around the edges. Might leave the lid off that so I don't have to keep taking it on and off. Okay, check the background, that looks fine. Make sure this is vertical. Match the corners with the edge of the paper. And stamp that one. Okay, that's 2 corners done. And again, re-inking, gently inking around. Now I've gone over a little bit on this one, so I can show you what I mean. We get the sponge out and just gently go in and wipe that excess ink off. Go around, there's a bit more there. So we're not wanting to take off the ink we've put onto the stamp on those corners, just from the background area. Alright, now go up to the top corner, make sure we're vertical, match the sides up, and stamp, re-ink. So using these Quilt Elements stamps, they're not difficult. If you know how to make a pattern, it's just a repeat of a pattern. So we're just inking and re-inking the same stamp and using it over and over to create our pattern. Alright, I'm just getting all that excess ink off. I'm obviously getting a bit sloppy with my stamping, with my inking. Okay. That excess out. Okay, down into the bottom corner. Again, making sure I'm vertical, matching those corners up with the edges, and stamp. Okay. Inking up again. Okay, just gentle tapping. A little bit extra in that time. Again, a little bit, we'll just wipe those little bits out. Okay, now for this lot I'm going to go between the 2 that I've already stamped. Let that focus again. Okay, so I'm coming in between this corner and this corner of my diamond. I'm going to match the 2 corners of this up in between those and this outer one against the edge. So I just want to match the 2 corners and the edge, and we'll stamp there. There we go. I'm going to do that for each side. So our basic pattern's down. Now what I'll do is I'll leave that ink there because we still need it for our next section. I'll just wipe off any ink off my stamp. Just a damp sponge. I've got just a dry cloth to dry my stamp off. And I'll put that back into the set. And we'll come back to the Quilt Elements. Now the next stamp I'm going to use is this one here. I'm going to add that stamp onto my block. Pop that out of the way. And this one is going to be my design inside my diagonal, my diamonds. Alright, so I'm using the same ink and just gently inking up my stamp. Don't need to worry about it getting onto the background on this one because this is a fuller design. And then all I'm going to do is line up. I can look over the top through my acrylic blocks. I can see the edges of this design. I can also see the edges of this square I've already stamped. I'm just going to stamp this in the center of that. Down on top of that, design in the center. Okay, and we're going to repeat that until all those squares are filled. Okay, ink up. Over the design, make sure I've got it lined up within the edges, straight down. Okay, we'll do another one. So the beauty of this Quilt Element Set is you can make your own designs up. If you're a quilter, you can use your quilt patterns and do your own decoration in them. Just add this one in here. You can look, if you're not a quilter, you can look through pattern books or online and see some quilting designs that you can make up using either the squares or the triangles or a combination of both in this set. And in Eclectic Images range, there's also some lovely quilt quotes. So we've got the one we're using today, which is "You Are So Special," but there's also some other lovely quilt quotes which you saw on one of my other cards. Okay. Halfway there. That one in. Okay, so now I can pop the lid back on my ink, pop it aside, clean off my stamp with a damp sponge, and pop it aside. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is create a bit of more of a border here. So back to the Quilt Element Set, and I'm going to use one of the other designs on here, this geometric one here. You can get great patterns out of this one. I'm just going to use it to fill in these little triangular bits around the edges, but you could do an all over pattern with that one using different colours or all the one colour. Looks fantastic embossed. Okay, let me get that one out, place it onto my block, move that one out of the way. Okay, so this time I just want to bring some brown into the image. So because our space under this is going to be brown, I want to add a bit more brown stamping in here. Now I don't have the Catherine Pooler brown inks at the moment, so I went through my collection of inks and I found a Versa Magic Sahara Sand, which I think works quite nicely on this, and it will give that nice chalky finish and soften that edge a bit. But yes, if you've got any of the Catherine Pooler brown shades, you could use one of those. Alright, so all I'm doing, again, just tapping over the top. I've got my scrap paper underneath because I'll be stamping off the edge. Ink up the whole stamp, and then all I'm doing is I'm bringing it in again with that diamond shape, and I'm lining up between the edges of the square already stamped and the lines on the stamp with the edge of the page, and stamping down. We get a gorgeous little finished edge there. And I'll repeat that all the way around. So again, ink up, line up the edges, stamp. Probably leave the lid off this one as well. Okay, so for the corner, just slightly different shape of triangle. Again, we're just going to ink up, still hold it on that diagonal, match that edge of our stamp up with this edge, and our lines with the edge of the paper. Stamp down, and then we've got a little corner here. And we continue to do this, working around the whole of the outsides. Tapping over, lining those edges up, stamp. Okay, just clean your ink off the stamp and it can go away. Alright, put the lid back on the ink. Okay, for the next bit we're going to do some embossing to add our focal image on. Because that chalk ink will still be a little wet, I'm just going to give it a quick blast with the heat gun to dry it off so that the embossing powder doesn't stick. Let's turn this over so we haven't got all that distracting pattern in the background. Okay, hopefully that's dry enough. Now we're going to stamp our sewing machine next. So I've added the sewing machine to an acrylic block. And I'm going to, before I stamp this, I'm going to use an anti-static pad, just in case there's still some dampness from that ink or any oil from my fingers. Just a bit of a tap and wipe over with the anti-static pad. Then I get my Versamark ink pad. And just ink up the stamp. Now this is quite a solid stamp, so make sure it's well inked. There's some large solid areas on it, and you want enough ink on there to hold the embossing powder so you don't end up with gaps in your embossing. Okay, now I think I might turn it that way. Look at your pattern in the background and see where you think it might look better. And you can hold your sewing machine over the top and work out where you want it to go. I think towards the bottom because I'm going to put my sentiment up the top. And then just make sure I'm centered, and then I'm going to push down. Just gently holding it with one hand and using the other hand just to gently press over the top to give a little bit of pressure to the stamp. Remember, it has some large solid areas, so you need time for that ink to soak into the paper. And always keep one hand on your block to keep it in one spot, otherwise you end up moving the stamp and getting a blurred image. That should be enough. I'll take that off. Okay, now open up my embossing powder, pop it to the side, get a bit of scrap paper out, put under this to catch the embossing powder. Okay, let's tip some of the embossing powder on, and then I'm just going to tap my brush back down that way. bit of a tap on the back. Okay, pop all that back into the container. Pop it to one side because I'm going to need it again in a minute. Now, there is some embossing powder that's still stuck around the outside. So obviously I didn't get all of that ink dry. So just brush off any bits that have stuck to the embossing powder. Let's have a look. Just a couple of little bits down there. Some over there. Okay, I think that will do it. Pop that back in the container as well. Alright, before I use the heat gun on that to emboss it, we're going to stamp our sentiment as well. So that's the "You Are So Special." I've already added that one to my acrylic block. So I'll ink up with the Versamark again. And I want this towards the top. Center it with the word "So" in the middle. And I'll just tap down on there. Again, hold your block with one hand. Use the other hand to gently press over the top to make sure you've got an even pressure for that ink to soak into the paper. And lift off. Bring the scrap paper back in. Sprinkle a bit of embossing powder over there. I'm using the brush. Tap on the paper. Just tap off, tap on the side, do a bit of a tap on the back. Now we'll look again. Yep, there's still just a few stray bits on that chalk ink. Just make sure it's all gone. Okay, let's pop that to one side while we pop this back in the jar. Tap it all down to the jar. This Japanese lacquer embossing powder is gorgeous. It's like a maroony colour with bits of black through it. It looks special on there, but once we heat it, you'll see the glossy colour with that black flecked through it. Okay, I'm going to use the heat gun on this again. Okay, let's see if it's all glossy, that I haven't missed any bits. Right, that's looking fine. Right. So once that's done, you've got your main image done. You'll then add some double-sided tape to the back. I'll just undo this. Run a piece across the top. Trim it off. Then we'll do the bottom. And there's many different ways you can apply your tape and put it on. I find this the easiest for me. I do a top and bottom and then each side If it's a bigger bit, I might also add a strip down the centre. Or if it's on something like a watercolour that's had a lot of water on it, it's a bit buckled, I'll add an extra bit in the centre. But this is just a lightweight paper, so just a bit on each of the sides, top, bottom and the other sides. And we'll get our black panel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the backing from the bottom piece off. Pull that one off. So we've got one sticky side, the rest is still covered. So they can move around and won't stick. And I can get them in position before putting my bottom bit down. So all I'm doing is I'm looking, because we should have a centimetre border all around. I'm just looking to see that it's even. And then I'll gently push down the bottom side. We just have the tape taken off. Then you can undo the back, the other 3 bits, and pull the backing off those. So off either side first. And then the top, and then we're going to gently push over the top of those. So that they lay flat on the card. Then you'll repeat the process on the back, so across the top and the bottom, one up each side, remove the bottom bit, move your top around till you've got equal borders, and then stick it down onto that. Let's take this piece of paper away so you get a better look at that. Okay, there's the completed card using Eclectic Images So Special kit. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll just bring in the other 2 samples that I've made using the kit. You can see them again. Move them across a little bit so you can see them all. Okay, don't forget to check out the Eclectic Images website, www.eclecticimages.com.au, and have a look under all the different tabs, and you can find the So Special kit and also in the stamp section for the quilt quotes, which are great to use with this set. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time.